Lastly, we are opening a mini site explaining the contents of the software in detail, so be sure to have a look if you are curious.
Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're taking a look at 25 facts about the Nintendo 3DS that you may not have known about.
If you turn the cards towards each other, they'll actually begin battling. Here's Pit and Medusa going at it.
Before we begin, we publish new videos all week long, so be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Discovering the third dimension. Though it was the first successful console to display stereoscopic 3D visuals, the 3DS was not Nintendo's first foray into this visual gimmick. Many would likely point to the Virtual Boy as their first attempt, but that sentiment wouldn't be correct either. Nintendo had been toying with the idea of stereoscopic 3D gaming way back in the 80s. The company had launched the Famicom 3D system, a peripheral users would wear to play compatible games in stereoscopic 3D. It was only ever released in Japan, and even in Nintendo's home country, it was a massive commercial failure. But that didn't deter them from future experiments. Stereoscopic scares. As we mentioned earlier, Nintendo would launch the Virtual Boy for yet another device to display stereoscopic 3D visuals. Alas, it didn't work out, but with the GameCube, there was a point where things looked a bit promising. While it was never utilized, the GameCube was capable of displaying stereoscopic 3D visuals. Nintendo had tested the feature with the GameCube launch title, Luigi's Mansion. The test was a success. However, were people willing to spend extra money for LCD attachments to stick to their televisions? And would the high cost of producing those attachments be worth running the risk of low sales? The answer was a resounding no. Some fun numerical stats. When the 3DS launched in February 2011, customers were forking over $249.99 USD for the system.
You'll get to experience today the opening of a vast new world in 3D entertainment.
This was $100 more than the original DS console launched at back in 2005, and that device saw substantial price cuts in the years leading up to the 3DS. Granted, the 3DS's high cost was likely because of all the graphical, audio, and UI improvements it came with. Regardless of the cost, units were selling out insanely quick in Japan, with other regions seeing them fly off the shelves just as fast.
The depth the 3D gives really adds to the immersion that the game delivers.
Rather than keep the price the same, Nintendo made a surprising move 6 months after launch, and reduced the price of the 3DS to $169.99 USD. After that, it almost became hard to find a 3DS anywhere. Meet the 3D Bunch. One could probably attribute the price cut to what folks were criticizing the 3DS for, and what Nintendo had in store to alleviate those problems. A common complaint was how hard it was for people with big hands to use the console. Well, in July 2012, the Nintendo 3DS XL launched, satisfying that crowd. But then, reports of people getting sick from 3D visuals and turning off the feature entirely began to increase. So, in 2013, why not buy the Nintendo 2DS, a cheaper alternative to the base 3DS at $129.99 USD? At this point, the lack of a second analog stick and some of the system's technical limitations were sticking out like a sore thumb with third-party games. In that case, have a new Nintendo 3DS with better tech and controls than our 3 other iterations. And yes, for the big-handed folks, there is a new Nintendo 3DS XL. And those sick from the visuals, you can have a new Nintendo 2DS XL. So to say you had options was an understatement. The trick behind the illusion. So one question that perplexed many folks was how Nintendo managed to achieve stereoscopic 3D in this manner. To see a device display this level of depth without the need of special glasses or visors was not something the public had experienced before. So how did they crack the code? Well, it's a combination of the hardware's capabilities and old-fashioned optical illusion tricks. With the use of a parallax barrier formed behind the screen, the 3D slider would shift the top screen's pixels enough to trick your eye into seeing depth despite displaying a 2D image. The new 3DS systems that were released later would implement a camera that would adjust the 3D visuals to the angle that the user is viewing the display from. Overtaking the dual-screen dynasty. The 3DS, as we went over a little bit ago, was a massive commercial success the second it hit store shelves across the globe. But what many may not know is that another Nintendo console had launched right when the 3DS was about to be revealed back in June 2010.
This is Nintendo 3DS.
In November 2009, the Nintendo DSi XL launched in Japan and released in other regions over the next few months. But interest had waned in the DS for the most part. The DSi especially wasn't super popular, given that it was just, a DS with a couple of camera lenses smashed into it. You could say the DSi was doomed to fail, and it got one of the quietest deaths in video game console history.
You're now ready to enjoy your new Nintendo 3DS.
Developer excitement. Both before and after the 3DS's launch, there was a ton of excitement from third-party developers about the console and its capabilities. Unfortunately, it led to some developers believing some wild theories, judging from what IGN reported during E3 2010.
Something you thought you knew perfectly well will now be perfectly transformed.
In an article detailing everything known and said about the system, IGN claimed developers were saying the 3DS, quote, has processing capabilities that far exceed the Nintendo Wii and bring the device with abilities that are close to HD consoles such as PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, end quote. Take that as you will, but a 480p resolution doesn't exactly scream close to HD to most folks, even those who were around in 2010. The first 3DS game revealed. So there was all of this hype behind this drastically improved DS system. But what was the game that kicked off all of the buzz? Well, one could say it was the very first game that they revealed. At E3 2010, Nintendo announced a ton of games for the 3DS, and the very first one they showed off was Kid Icarus Uprising.
Twin Bellow! Underworld's faithful watchdog.
Funny enough, this wound up becoming a game that was arguably announced just a little too early. Kid Icarus Uprising would launch in March 2012, just under 2 years after it was first revealed. Not only did Masahiro Sakurai direct the game, he also wrote the game's story and dialogue himself.
Your days of darkness are numbered. Prepare to meet the light!
Let's return for now. This was just our first step in defeating Medusa.
Hybrid release. At the time of the 3DS's launch, Nintendo was still focusing on physical distribution of their games. There were some smaller titles released for the Wii, but nothing major to install on the console. By this point, Xbox and PlayStation were already all in on digital games while still belting out physical copies. Nintendo made a big leap into the digital ecosystem at the same time as the launch of the 3DS XL, with New Super Mario Bros. 2. If you had the funds and didn't want to drive to a store, you could now simply buy the game through the Nintendo eShop and download the game. New Super Mario Bros. 2 was, in other words, the first 3DS game to get both a physical release and a digital release.
This way!
The built-in game. It is likely that when most folks got their new 3DS, they booted it up and went straight for whatever game or games mom and dad bought with their console. What those players may not have known is that the 3DS did come bundled with a game already. The little gem some ignored was called Face Raiders, a game where players used the system's camera to look for and shoot down creatures that have stolen faces from pictures the player has taken.
Move with your Nintendo 3DS system, physically leaning and turning all around to aim and take out your targets.
It was a simple game that could be beaten in less than an hour, but it perfectly displayed the 3DS's capabilities in visuals and depth. The potential of coexistence. Throughout 2017 and the years that followed, the Nintendo Switch had taken the world by storm, which left many people wondering what would become of the 3DS. Some refused to believe the dream was dying, as others were already wanting to move on and kill off the handheld. The Switch gods were calling for its sacrifice.
Offering a handy touchscreen, numerous ways to play, and the ability to share your favorite gaming moments.
But then President of Nintendo of America, Reggie Fils-Aimé, had a different belief. Fils-Aimé went on record to claim that the 3DS and the Switch could coexist, and he would stiffen on that stance in 2018. However, that same year, Nintendo began winding down production on 3DS consoles as sales went on a sharp decline. The Switch gods had indeed claimed their sacrifice.
Expand your horizons, and before long, you'll feel right at home.
The launch lineup. For many of us older folks, it's almost hard to remember what games launched with the 3DS. There were quite a number of titles available at launch and shortly after. So which ones were there day one? Well, Face Raiders for example, but of the bigger titles, only 3 of them came from Nintendo's internal teams. Those being Pilot Wings Resort, Nintendogs Plus Cats, and Steel Diver. Other launch titles included Rayman 3D, a remake of Rayman 2: The Great Escape, Super Street Fighter IV 3D Edition, Super Monkey Ball 3D, and Madden NFL Football? That was certainly a lineup.
Oh, that's awesome.
Adapting to adapter problems. One of the biggest oddities that occurred during the 3DS's lifespan came at a time when Nintendo was playing around with bundles. Normally, when you buy a new gaming system, you're supposed to get all of the necessary parts to run the console. In the 3DS's case, it would be the system and the charger. Well, for some reason, Nintendo had the bright idea of selling 3DS bundles that came with the system and a game, but no charger. Some units, such as the 3DS XL and new 3DS XL, didn't even come with a charger. In a statement given to gaming media outlet Polygon, a Nintendo representative stated, quote, "Rather than raise the cost of new Nintendo 3DS XL by charging consumers for a component they may already own, we are giving them the option to only buy if they need an AC adapter," end quote. I question the iQue. While the rest of the world knew the 3DS as, Nintendo 3DS, things went a little differently in another part of the world. Due to restrictions in China, Nintendo had established a subsidiary in 2002 in partnership with Taiwanese-American entrepreneur Wei Yen, called the iQue. This company would help develop the Virtual Console service while also localizing and distributing Nintendo products in accordance with Chinese law and regulations.
And there is no need to pay a monthly.
So in China, the Nintendo 3DS was sold as iQue 3DS. The 3DS XL would be the last console to use the iQue name, as Nintendo would gain complete ownership in 2013. As of 2026, iQue serves as an internal support studio for Nintendo and its other teams.
It's a game changer.
The last and only stand. Like many other Nintendo devices, the 3DS saw a sizable handful of different peripherals and attachments produced for various gimmicks. But there was one that only seemed to be useful for one game, and it was made by Nintendo themselves. When Kid Icarus Uprising launched in 2012, every copy came with a special stand.
It's hard to get a good read on him. I can't tell if he's weird or just dim.
This stand was meant to prop up the 3DS and allow the players to play the game more comfortably. But but if you wanted to buy the stand a la carte, you were SOL. The only way to obtain a 3DS stand for yourself was by buying a copy of Kid Icarus Uprising, unless you could somehow find a secondhand one. These days, a complete in-box copy of the game with the stand will cost you a fairly pretty penny.
Oh, goody! Don't let us get you the fisticuffing!
A living money printer. The 3DS saw many stellar titles in its near-decade-long run. Star Fox 64 3D, The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, and even Super Smash Bros. For 3DS were all insanely great games. But none of these were the best-selling game of the handheld. No, that achievement goes to a rather unsurprising contender, Mario Kart 7. Despite some divisiveness regarding the character roster and course selection, Mario Kart 7 still managed to sell nearly 19 million copies. It is perhaps the most casual-friendly franchise in Nintendo's catalog, so this all makes a ton of sense. Nintendo's foray into streaming. Another interesting facet of the 3DS's lifespan was the short-lived streaming service Nintendo offered called Nintendo Video. Nintendo Video was basically the company's own YouTube-Netflix hybrid, where side projects, like animated videos based on upcoming game releases, would be uploaded. In between, you could enjoy videos from a variety of other companies like College Humor, Aardman, and Frederator Studios. You could even watch a special version of Kirby Right Back at Ya that was rendered in stereoscopic 3D. Sadly, the service died roughly halfway into the 3DS's lifetime, lasting from 2011 to 2015. Nintendo 3DS. For the photographer. It's not shocking at all to see that most folks used their 3DS systems for gaming, and gaming only, but there was a small but dedicated player base that relished in the handheld's functionality as a camera.
The pictures that you'll get will show a whole new dimension. There's also a lot more you can do with your photos.
For its time, the 3DS was fairly impressive for a gaming console that supported photography. In addition to supporting photo editing software, the 3DS boasted 2 external cameras and 1 internal camera that could take photos at 480p. Not a widely preferred resolution, but the cool part about it was that you could take photos with your friends and give them that stereoscopic 3D visual effect. It didn't boast the same amount of depth as the games did, yet it was enough to have some fun with.
Add stamps and drawings on top of them that show up in 3D. Use the merge lens to combine pictures of 2 people in one.
MP3DS. Another function of the 3DS some may not have paid much attention to was its audio player. Your 3DS was essentially an MP3 player that you could close and still listen to music while you're out for a stroll. Yeah, it was chunkier to carry in your pocket compared to an iPod or an iPhone. Regardless, you could store MP3 files onto an SD card or even record your own sounds via the Nintendo 3DS Sound application. Super Smash Bros. For 3DS also supported an MP3 mode where you could close the console and listen to tracks from across various Nintendo franchises. Bending reality, one augment at a time.
This is one of the AR cards that comes included with the Nintendo 3DS system. When you look at the card through the Nintendo 3DS outer cameras, you'll see things that are not really there.
Games utilizing augmented reality have been slowly rising in recent years. Pokemon Go exploded in 2016, and Five Nights at Freddy's Special Delivery was a thing, but the 3DS was really pushing for this kind of gaming. For instance, 3DS consoles used to come with special AR cards where you could summon characters onto your screen and make them pose for photos. Kid Icarus Uprising came with its own set of AR cards where you could have characters battle each other.
We'll be at some upcoming events giving out more AR cards so you can trade, share, and get new cards.
Despite Nintendo's push for it, many third-party developers didn't even bother giving AR gaming a shot during the 3DS's run. The last first party. 2018 was a troubling year for the 3DS between the Switch's booming success and its own shutdowns of various applications. But it was also the final year where we would get a first-party exclusive for the handheld. The final first-party 3DS game was WarioWare Gold. Though it was more of the same microgames we have seen before, Gold was the first time in the series where the story was fully voice-acted, and it even gave players the ability to dub the cutscenes themselves.
Much better, that really did the trick.
So, the elixir. Tell me what you think. Anything I should work on?
Alas, the game was a huge commercial flop. We're talking about tens of thousands of copies sold. Yeah, it was pretty bad, and it was most likely because people had their eyes fixed on the Switch. Nintendo loves the Louvre. Yeah, you read that right, Nintendo loved the Louvre. Likely they still do, but the 3DS showed a brief but happy partnership between the gaming company and the French Museum. Together, the two organizations created a special program where Louvre guests could use 3DS consoles to take audio-visual tour guides of the museum via a special application.
これが本当は風の当たる青空の場所にあるので、この 3D の背景にもそれを入れたいっていう相談とかもしたんですけど。
Nintendo 3DS guide Louvre allowed visitors to listen to 30 hours of audio related to various works of art and even view special 3D renders of different paintings. The Louvre itself even provided a service where guests could rent a 3DS to experience everything the application had to offer. It wasn't until September 2025 when the 3DS guides were officially retired.
A 3D video to Nintendo eShop showing you the 3D view of the famed Venus de Milo.
Patent problems with Sony.
There are two screens. The touchscreen on the bottom provides console controls and the larger 3D display on top.
Despite its original concept and resounding success, Nintendo did face legal troubles for a brief moment after the 3DS launched. Seijiro Tomita, a former Sony employee, alleged that Nintendo had violated a Sony patent where 3D visuals could be displayed without the need for glasses. At first, Nintendo was ordered to pay an exorbitant $30.2 million in damages until another judge reviewed the case and lowered the fee in 2013. Judge Jed Rakoff found the initial penalty to be, quote, intrinsically excessive, end quote, and instead had Nintendo pay Tomita 1.82% of every 3DS unit sold at wholesale price. 5 years later, the United States Appeals Court looked at the case again and determined that no violation was ever committed to begin with.
Of a vast new world in 3D entertainment.
This is really amazing.
Native mode.
Did you know you can play nearly all of your Nintendo DS and DSi games on your new Nintendo 3DS or Nintendo 3DS XL?
A weird transition from legalities back to backwards compatibility, but some folks noticed a weird issue when playing DS games on 3DS. Because the 3DS bloated the size of the screen, some DS games became harder to play than when they were on the smaller original screen. You suddenly had to make bigger swipes and strokes than you ever did before. Well, there was a way to alleviate that problem and play them more efficiently. Hold the start button while booting up a DS game on 3DS, and the game will be displayed in a native mode. Not only will you get the same resolution as the regular DS displayed, but the 3DS's higher pixel count allows the game to display at a crisper quality.
So you can still enjoy all your old favorites on your new console.
And lastly, a secret game?
One of the things I love the most about Nintendo is all the fun little Easter eggs and hidden features they hide in their consoles and games.
Yes, there is a secret game you can play on the 3DS. Sadly, it is not a full-blown sequel to Face Raiders, but rather a Game & Watch game.
Did you know there was a hidden minigame inside the 3DS's music player?
The 3DS sound application contains a special Game & Watch game that you can play thanks to the Visualizer tool. It'll even keep track of your score in case you start getting carried away. But you're gonna have to mess with the 3DS sound application for several hours before you can discover this little minigame for yourself. Yes, the app was pretty annoying when it came to unlocking features, and it still is today.
When playing an MP3, you have the option of selecting one of a bunch of different visualizations, one of which is a fully playable Game & Watch soccer game.
Did any of these facts surprise you? Let us know down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays.